Which game will be crowned Game of the Year in 2023 is a debate that's probably going to heat up this weekend with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom launching, but it's also launching at the same time as another beta from Diablo IV. And I have an article here saying that this could be an early clash between two potential Game of the Year candidates. Now, I obviously have my own opinion about whether or not this is an actual face-off between the two, but I thought it would be fun to read through and just think through the comparisons that will likely be made. There are a handful of frontrunners this year for Game of the Year. Final Fantasy XVI, The Legend of Zelda. I think Spiderman 2 will probably surprise many people from everything that we're hearing about it. Starfield and Diablo IV are obvious contenders as well if they can sort of stick the landing when they come out. And I personally think Hogwarts Legacy may surprise people given its commercial success as well as the critical acclaim for it, and it just landed on old gen to lots of praise for just how well it runs. I was actually very worried about that. Turns out my concern was not, really warranted. Well, it was probably warranted, but thankfully it didn't come to fruition. It still needs to land on the Nintendo Switch in July. So the Game of the Year debate is going to be ongoing throughout the year, and it's about to heat up because in May we get Zelda, and then June is both Diablo and Final Fantasy XVI, and then September is both Starfield and allegedly Spider-Man. We don't have an official date yet, but that's sort of the rumor right now. And I would love to know what you think. What do you think is going to take home the crown? I know a lot of these games aren't out yet, but it sort of is obvious sometimes. It's kind of like when you see movie trailers and you're like, well, that thing's going to go for the Oscar. You can kind of tell which games are going to be running for the front spot. Again, as long as they can stick the landing when they come out. And with The Legend of Zelda, it's a tough one to contend with because it's Zelda. It's one of the more anticipated games. So this is from Game Rant, and it says May 12th could be an early clash of two potential Game of the Year candidates. The weekend of May 12th could be one of the year's biggest for gaming, as two potential Game of the Year contenders will face off for players' attention. Now, if you have, already played the Diablo beta previously, you might not care, but it will be available again this weekend with the server slam, and there are changes made to the game. A lot of the changes, that they were putting out there about the Druid and some other things will actually be in the game for that server slam. So May 12th is looking like a busy day for gamers of all types as two of the year's biggest titles will be competing for players' attention. Not only The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom releasing that day, but Diablo IV is beginning its Server Slam beta as well, offering players one final chance to check out the game before its release in June. Also remember, during that Server Slam, there's another opportunity to fight the world boss and get like a mount and unlock, and one last chance to get the little wolf pup for your back. And the beta put up very impressive numbers, but Zelda is going to be an absolute leviathan to contend with. And I honestly think most of the people who own the Nintendo Switch and are big Zelda fans are likely not going to be wooed by a server slam because there's going to be queues, there's going to be problems. They're basically inviting people to everybody log in and try and, slam the servers. With the proper launch of the highly anticipated sequel, Zelda Breath of the Wild, clashing with Diablo IV's new Server Slam beta, the weekend of May 12th through the 14th might give players a preview of 2023's Game of the Year matchup. Now, I don't know if Diablo will get the nomination. I think the campaign alone will likely get it the nomination for Game of the Year because I can tell that they put a lot of work into it. Blizzard doesn't really pull, their punches when it comes to telling really, compelling campaigns and really great cinematics. I have my own concerns about the ongoing model, and that may come to fruition for how the game is judged because games can be nominated for ongoing game, community support, RPG, things of that nature. And if it gets criticized or ridiculed or if there's lots of complaints, that could hurt its standing for Game of the Year if it doesn't get good nominations or if it doesn't win other categories. But it stands to land in lots of different categories, which tends to help something getting into that Game of the Year podium standing. While this won't be the first chance fans have had to check out Diablo IV prior to launch, it might be the most important opportunity to dive into Sanctuary, as it will give players their closest look at how the game will play at launch. That's actually true, given all of the changes that they are making. Those of us that were really excited about the Druid, I'm sort of dreading whether or not he's even going to be worth playing out of the box. He was terrible during the beta that I played, and many people have said, oh, well, you know, he'll get better in the end game, or he'll get better once he can get his spirit animals or whatever. It's like, I don't care about that. If the first 15 to 20 to 30 levels are unenjoyable, that's not a good game design. I shouldn't have to wait until the end game for them to get better or get enjoyable. The journey should be just as fun as the end game in its own way, and it's not going to be fun if they don't address some of the significant problems with his strength, especially comparatively to like the Necro and the Sorcerer. However, it unfortunately coincides with the release of Nintendo's latest entry in its legendary franchise, and if previews are any indication, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom could be the biggest entry in the series. Regardless of if players will be checking out one or both of these games, May 12th will mark a huge weekend for gaming as a whole. My favorite thing about Tears of the Kingdom that I learned before diving in was there was an interview where they confirmed a return to dungeons, and the dungeons will be region-based. They'll have a theme of the region that they're in. Unlike the first game, unlike Breath of the Wild, where there were only 4 dungeons that weren't even really dungeons, they were more like elaborate puzzles. This is going to be sort of a return to form. So I'm really excited about that. I already did a video about sort of the old blending with the new. It sort of seemed like that was going to be happening in the trailer. If you're sort of paying attention, there's like little clues of like old bosses coming back and things like that, like a Gleeok, like the 3-headed dragon. It's going to be a tough undertaking for players who plan to split their attention across both games during the weekend of May 12th, but it might just be worth it for players interested in both Diablo IV and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. The Diablo IV Server Slam is the final chance players will have to claim beta rewards, including the initial Casualty and Early Voyager titles, and the Beta Wolf Pack cosmetic item, and the Cry of Ashava Mount trophy, which is exclusive to Server Slam players who defeat the world boss Ashava with a level 20 character. And they did call on people during their developer stream, don't go and try it until you're level 20. You're just pulling the group down. We co-streamed that seasonal stream, that dev update about the seasons, and we had a bit of a debate afterwards. If you want to go watch that debate about whether or not, you know, I think people should be able to use their main character or an existing character in a season and just sort of opt out of ladder races just because of the nature of how people approach these games. Not everybody wants to start over every single time. Maybe they just want to work on the battle pass. Maybe they just want to work on the seasonal challenges and get the cool rewards. And I'm running a poll on Twitter, and it's 70% in favor of, yeah, I would love to be able to do that. That's great. What's the big deal if you let players do that? It's not going to hurt other players' experience who enjoy making new characters. So, big debate. Go check it out if you want to see it. Players can only receive these items during the beta period, so it's worth trying to hit max level. Additionally, the Diablo IV Server Slam is worth participating in for players looking to refine their builds ahead of launch, as this beta will be more reflective of the final game. Blizzard has announced that the drop rate for legendary items has been decreased to the level it will be at launch, and the 5 classes available during the previous beta have been rebalanced according to the data gained from it. They did say that about the drop rate, so that is the one thing I'm interested in coming out of the Server Slam beta is what's the drop rates look like. They were pretty high for early game, which was fun if you're just green arrow chasing, right? You're just constantly getting great drops, and it's like, oh, it's a green arrow, ding, and like equipping it. But it did take a little bit of the fun out of getting an item and using it for a while, or getting a nice piece of armor and wearing it for a while. Obviously, Transmog lets you sort of negate some of that if you find something that you think looks really great. This means the Server Slam is the perfect chance for players to test out potential builds and refine their strategy for tackling Diablo IV demon hordes ahead of the game's official launch. While slamming Diablo IV server sounds appealing, it might be hard to pull players away from their Switches long enough to hit level 20. Since this is only a beta for the game, players looking to dive into the world of Hyrule and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will be getting the experience the launch of a full game instead. With how vast the world Tears of the Kingdom seems to have, it may be hard for some players to split their time between Sanctuary and Hyrule. I don't think people are going to be splitting their time, if I'm honest. I think once you crack open Zelda, you're going to be in there for the long haul. And this isn't really a face-off, if we're honest, but I do think it's an interesting discussion. If you put these two games up on the podium for Game of the Year alongside of Final Fantasy 16 and Spider-Man 2, potentially Starfield and Hogwarts, a lot of big games coming this year, and I just wonder if a game like Diablo 4 stands a chance against more robust games. And I know that's not necessarily fair, but I just wonder if the isometric ARPG is going to have a harder time, just because there's less to the game to a certain degree. And a game like Zelda is being far more innovative. If you look at the things they're letting you do with the weapon fusion, if you're looking at what I think it's called Ultra Hand, where you can, make vehicles out of just stuff that's around, they've created almost a game within a game. There's sort of a sandbox game within the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And Diablo 4 is great. It is. And I've had fun with the beta. I have, my concerns about the ongoing content model. But a lot of people are looking at it and thinking that it's more like a Diablo 3.5. And I always think that's an unfair criticism because it's totally legitimate to give people more of what they liked. But as far as I can see, Diablo 4 is mainly making itself, crafting itself, and honing itself in for career Diablo players, people that are still sort of in the mix with the Diablo 3 seasons and that grind. And I think that takes it down a few pegs for a Game of the Year discussion, because if you're going to be building on the sequel, you've really got to stand out. You have to have a breakout moment if you're going to take Game of the Year. I tend to do this argument when it comes to The Last of Us Part 2 beating Ghost of Tsushima. I think a new IP should have a significant leg up in the competition because it's a lot harder to enter the market as a new IP. And Sony's done an incredible job. If you didn't see the blog post sort of celebrating Horizon Forbidden West, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Call of the Mountain, just Horizon as a brand is doing very well as a new IP. Just very impressive. And Ghost of Tsushima is no different. So I think that has to be considered. And when we look at The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and we look at Diablo 4, they're both adding on to an existing franchise. So the question is, which one innovated more? On the surface, it seems like that would go to Zelda. So let's continue reading here. It's rare to see two of the year's biggest games competing with each other on the same day when one isn't even at full release, but Diablo 4 Server Slam could be a solid competition for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom's release. I agree and don't agree, because there's just so many people that aren't going to feel the need to dive back in. That's naturally going, I think, to not hurt engagement with the beta, but be easy for people to siphon off. I myself have already played both betas. I don't need to play it a third time, especially when Zelda's coming out, right? Diablo 4 Server Slam lasts through the weekend of May 12th through the 14th, but players may want to hop in the login queue while playing their Switch in order to effectively manage their time. That is true. A lot of what might hurt whether or not people play Diablo is the fact that they don't have to sit in a queue to play Zelda, right? With two potential Game of the Year contenders going head-to-head on the same weekend, May 12th will likely be one of the biggest days for gaming in 2023. Now, that I agree with. That is kind of true. It is a unique scenario. We're in a great year, to be fair. If we're going to be having a debate about Game of the Year, and it's really tough to call at this point. Just imagine that Final Fantasy XVI, Spider-Man 2, Starfield, they all land to critical acclaim, right? Let's just say, they're all 9s out of 10s. They do exactly what everybody's hoping. They're innovative, they're amazing, the graphics, the size, the performance, no blemishes, right? Because Jedi Survivor, I think, had a chance to be up there, but its launch, I think they really hurt themselves with the launch. I still think Jedi Survivor will get some nominations because I'm hearing amazing things about the story, and people just really enjoy it if they can sort of eat around the performance issues. But I do think that hurt Jedi Survivor, which sort of thins out the podium for everybody else. So from where I sit, if all these games land and are at least an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 on average, it's going to be a tough call to say who wins. But as we've seen in the past, Zelda is really, really tough to beat. They go pretty hard. The only thing I think standing in the way of Tears of the Kingdom winning handedly is the fact that if it's a little too similar to Breath of the Wild, if it doesn't break apart enough from Breath of the Wild, I think that'll take it down a peg. But there's a lot of sequels that'll be on the podium this year. Spider-Man 2, Tears of the Kingdom, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 16, kind of a sequel, right? And then Hogwarts would be, and Starfield, if they both end up there, they would be the only true new IPs to be on the Game of the Year podium. And I just think that has to be considered. I was really happy when It Takes Two won, but in my mind, I still think that year goes to Returnal. It was the most innovative, most ambitious, and it was actually a next-gen title amidst a crowd of very few that year. So I would have given it to Returnal. And then when Elden Ring won over God of War Ragnarok, I was totally fine with that. I thought Elden Ring did so many things exactly right with respect to open world exploration. It definitely deserved the leg up over God of War Ragnarok. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this going to be a huge weekend, big face-off? What are you playing? Are you choosing between the two? And who do you have winning Game of the Year this year at the Game Awards in December? We'll be co-streaming it, so make sure you're here. As always, hit subscribe, hit the bell button, and I'll see you in the next video.